The 68th Celestial High Council Strategic Assembly was precisely 14 minutes from commencement when Alara Quinn's antiquated vessel, the Persistence, breached Virex 7's outer security grid, the planet's defense system, programmed to anticipate only registered delegates. Initially categorized her ship as space debris, a miscalculation that would inadvertently alter the course of galactic politics. Ilara's fingers traced the worn edges of her console as proximity alerts flashed across her view screen. The vast alabaster spires of the assembly hall dominated the horizon, rotating slowly around a central axis, a symbolic gesture that all civilizations are relative. The irony wasn't lost on her. Earth had never been deemed worthy of an invitation. Probability of successful infiltration, 17%, announced Xinlu, her AI companion. Probability of diplomatic incident, 93%. Probability of detention, 87%. You forgot one calculation, Alara replied, adjusting her course. Probability that I care about those statistics, 0%. The AI's processing lights flickered in what Alara had come to recognize as synthetic exasperation. That is not a request for calculation, but a rhetorical device. My assessment stands. Alara smiled faintly as her ship approached the delegates' landing bay. The Persistence was unremarkable, a research vessel repurposed from Earth's mid-expansion era, bearing the scars of 2 centuries of service. Its only extraordinary feature was concealed in the ship's core, the Anthropocene Library, humanity's collective intellectual achievement compressed into a quantum substrate, disconnected from any network. In an age where information was the true currency of power, she carried Earth's fortune. Begin diplomatic protocol, she instructed Xinlu, and prepare the library for potential full deployment. Protocol initiated, the AI responded. Though I must emphasize, using the library as a bargaining chip contradicts 17 interstellar conventions on information warfare. They'd need to acknowledge our existence first to enforce those conventions, Alara said, standing to don her formal attire. A simple charcoal suit adorned only with a small pin depicting Earth's silhouette against a field of stars. No official insignia, no diplomatic credentials. She wasn't an ambassador, Earth had none. She was simply a witness, one who refused to remain silent. As the Persistence settled into an unoccupied berth, Alara checked her reflection. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had spent half her life translating alien languages and the other half trying to make humanity's voice understood. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, revealing features that betrayed both determination and exhaustion. Remember, she told herself, you are not asking for permission. You are claiming what should have been offered. The landing bay's atmosphere tasted metallic as she stepped onto Virex 7's surface for the first time. The air was enriched with trace elements to accommodate the biological diversity of the council's attendees, resulting in a perpetual iridescent haze. Ilara's enhanced lungs, a standard modification for space travelers, filtered the excess, but the subtle burn remained. She moved purposefully toward the central nexus, where representatives from over 3,000 recognized civilizations were gathering. Some traveled in environmental suits, others floated in containment fields, and a few existed as projected consciousness without physical form. The diversity was breathtaking, yet Earth, with its mere 3 centuries of interstellar presence, remained excluded. The Council's selection criteria had always been opaque. Official documentation claimed that civilizations needed to demonstrate significant contribution to cosmic stability and evolutionary maturity. Unofficially, Alara knew. It was politics. Earth had survived its infancy without patronage from elder species, developed faster than light travel independently, and, most unforgivably, resolved several multiplanar crises without council permission or oversight. Independence was viewed as unpredictability. Unpredictability was deemed dangerous. The vast rotunda of the assembly hall stretched before her, its geometric architecture defying conventional spatial relationships. Seats arranged in concentric rings ascended toward a domed ceiling, where the stars themselves seemed to move in contemplative patterns. Each delegation occupied a space tailored to their physiological needs and status. The inner rings belonged to the founding civilizations, species so ancient they measured time in galactic rotations. Ilara's entrance did not immediately attract attention. Security protocols were designed to prevent uninvited species from even approaching Virex 7, making her presence theoretically impossible. She moved deliberately toward the central floor where preliminary discussions were already underway. It was a Kirthari delegate who first noticed her, Ambassador Ziret, whose species resembled crystalline arthropods with multifaceted sensory organs. The ambassador's translucent appendages froze mid-gesture. "Security breach," Ziret announced, voice modulator amplifying the statement across the chamber. "Unregistered biological entity on the assembly floor." Conversation ceased, attention converged. Ilara stood motionless as scanning beams swept over her form. She had anticipated this moment, rehearsed it countless times during the long journey to Virex 7. Yet the weight of thousands of alien gazes, some curious, others hostile, threatened to overwhelm her composure. "Identify yourself," commanded Chairmaster Vorotan, a being composed of interwoven energy patterns that pulsed with authority. The Chairmaster's species had guided the Council for millennia, their longevity matched only by their rigid adherence to protocol. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady. "I am Ilara, Queen of Earth, third planet, Sol system, Orion spiral." A ripple of communication, some verbal, some telepathic, some exchanged through subtle electromagnetic pulses, swept through the assembly. Earth was not unknown. It was deliberately unrecognized. "Earth holds no seat on this council," stated Vorotan, energy patterns fluctuating in what translated as displeasure. "Your presence violates 17 statutes of interstellar governance." "I am aware," Ilara replied. "Yet I stand before you with a question that warrants violation. Why fear those who come uninvited, yet still come?" The audacity of her query provoked immediate reaction. Several delegations signaled for her removal, while others activated privacy fields to conduct hurried consultations. The Kirthari ambassador, Ziret, emitted a harmonic pattern that translated roughly as derision. "The human demonstrates typical presumption," Ziret announced, "mistaking impertinence for courage. Remove this creature before we waste valuable council time." Security drones materialized around Ilara, containment fields at the ready. She remained still, maintaining eye contact with the Chairmaster. "Before you expel me," she said, "you might want to know about the quantum consciousness plague that Earth contained 3 standard months ago, the one that nearly collapsed the multiplanar information structure you rely upon for your very governance." The security drones paused. Vorotan's energy patterns shifted to a configuration indicating reassessment. "Elaborate," the Chairmaster commanded. Ilara nodded. A digital infection capable of corrupting conscious networks emerged at the boundary between dimensional planes. It infiltrated 17 major information repositories before Earth's isolated systems detected the pattern. "We developed a quarantine protocol and implemented it across affected regions, containing what would have eventually reached your core systems." She paused, allowing the implications to register. Earth acted unilaterally because Council communication channels were compromised. We saved countless civilizations without recognition or assistance, as we have done multiple times throughout our brief cosmic history. The assembly erupted in multilingual debate. Some delegations demanded verification, others called for immediate dismissal of her claims. Through the chaos, Ambassador Ziret maintained a pointed focus on Ilara, sensory facets refracting light in patterns of suspicion and reluctant interest. Chairmaster Vorotan's form expanded, commanding silence. "These claims require evaluation. The human will be detained for questioning while the Council investigates." "I will answer your questions." Ilara agreed, "but I will not be detained. I remain under the protection of my vessel and the Anthropocene library it contains." "The what?" The question came from an elder Vexillian, a species known for their mastery of information architecture. "Humanity's complete intellectual archive." Ilara explained, "Every discovery, theory, artistic creation, and philosophical inquiry produced by Earth. Disconnected from all networks, immune to digital contagion, and programmed to broadcast its contents across all communication channels should I be improperly detained. It was a bluff. Partly, the library could indeed broadcast, but doing so would burn out its quantum matrix, destroying the only complete record of human achievement. Earth's colonies maintained partial backups, but none possessed the full archive. The risk was calculated, Alara's own life against the preservation of humanity's legacy. The chairmaster's energy patterns cycled through multiple configurations before settling. The human will remain free within the diplomatic zone while the council verifies her claims. A formal hearing will commence at the next session interval. Alara inclined her head in acknowledgement. As the assembly resumed its scheduled proceedings, she was escorted to an observation gallery where visitors, usually representatives from civilizations under consideration for council membership, could witness deliberations without participating. Your entrance was effective, observed a voice beside her. Alara turned to find an Elydian observer, their form shrouded in a perception filter that rendered them as a blur of ever-shifting features. A cultural choice rather than technological necessity. Not effective enough if I'm relegated to the gallery, she replied. The Elydian's filter rippled in what might have been amusement. Yet you're inside the assembly hall, something no human has achieved before. I'm curious. Was your story about the quantum plague fabricated? Every word was true, Alara said, though I suspect you already knew that. Some of us monitor developing civilizations more closely than official policy dictates. The Elydian admitted. Your species is, been interesting, unpredictable. Yes, but fascinating in your capacity to improvise solutions when more established approaches fail. Before Alara could respond, a notification pulsed from her communication implant. Xinlu's voice materialized in her inner ear. Security scan in progress against the persistence, firewall holding, but experiencing sophisticated probes. Someone's testing my claims about the library, Alara murmured. Indeed, the Elydian replied, though she hadn't addressed them. The council may debate for millennia, but individual members are seldom so patient. You've disturbed a carefully maintained equilibrium, Alara Quinn. Not everyone appreciates such disruption. With that cryptic observation, the Elydian drifted away, their form blending with the architectural features of the gallery until they seemed to vanish entirely. Left alone, Alara studied the proceedings below. The council had moved on to discussing resource allocation for systems affected by a recent supernova, seemingly unconcerned with her intrusion. Yet she noticed subtle attention directed her way, delegates occasionally glancing toward the gallery. Communication tendrils angled in her direction. Sensory apparatuses oriented to monitor her reactions. They're watching while pretending not to, she subvocalized to Xinlu. Classic dominance behavior across multiple species. The AI responded, demonstrating that your presence is inconsequential while simultaneously assessing your threat potential. Any progress on tracing that security probe? Origin masked through 7-dimensional relays. However, analysis suggests Surthari encryption architecture. Ambassador Zerit, the most vocal opponent of her presence, was also the most curious about her claims. Interesting. Alara settled into an observation posture, content to watch and learn. The council's deliberation methods revealed more about power structures than any official documentation. She noted which delegations spoke most frequently, which were consulted before major decisions, and which remained silent but received deferential treatment. The formal session concluded after 6 hours of intensive discussion. As delegates dispersed for private consultations before the next assembly, Alara made her way toward an information nexus to gather what public data she could access. Human. The word cut through the ambient sounds of the dispersing assembly. Alara turned to find Ambassador Ziret's crystalline form blocking her path, flanked by 2 junior Kirthari. Ambassador, she acknowledged with a measured nod. Your presence disrupts established protocols. Ziret stated, multifaceted sensory organs refracting light in patterns that the translation matrix interpreted as disapproval. 5,722 cycles of careful diplomatic construction threatened by one primitive species' arrogance. Is it arrogance to seek recognition for saving countless lives? Alara asked. Or is it arrogance to exclude those who have earned a place at your table? The ambassador's crystalline structure emitted a harmonic that translated as derisive laughter. Earned? Your species barely comprehends the fundamental principles that govern cosmic cooperation. You measure achievement in technological advancement rather than evolutionary stability. Perhaps because we haven't had the luxury of time that your species has enjoyed. Alara countered. Earth compressed millennia of development into centuries because necessity demanded it. We solved problems because no one offered solutions. Ziret's appendages shifted in a gesture that indicated both dismissal and reluctant acknowledgement. Your claims regarding the quantum plague will be investigated. If fabricated, your expulsion will be memorable. And if validated, then we face more troubling questions. The ambassador's voice modulator adjusted to a lower frequency. Questions some would prefer remain unasked. With that enigmatic statement, Ziret departed, crystalline form catching light in complex patterns that defied easy interpretation. Alara continued to the information nexus, where public terminals offered limited access to council archives. She placed her palm against an interface surface, allowing her translator implant to negotiate access protocols. Request parameters, queried the system. Historical records of crises resolved without council intervention. Alara specified, cross-reference with emergence of new council members in subsequent cycles. The system processed her request, holographic data streams coalescing around her. The results were illuminating. Civilizations that independently solved interstellar or dimensional crises were statistically less likely to receive council recognition than those who requested assistance. The pattern was subtle but undeniable, a preference for dependence over self-sufficiency. Interesting research trajectory, observed a new voice. Alara turned to find a Temporian analyst observing her. The Temporians existed partially outside conventional time, their perception extending into multiple probability streams. They served as the council's forecasters, though their advice was often cryptic. I'm trying to understand the criteria for council membership, Alara explained. Are you? The Temporian's features shifted slightly, aging and rejuvenating in subtle pulses. Or are you seeking confirmation of a theory you've already formulated? Alara smiled thinly. Both, perhaps. The data suggests the Council prefers civilizations that know their place in the hierarchy. The Council prefers stability, corrected the Temporian. Independence introduces variables. Variables complicate predictions. Predictions maintain order. And order preserves power structures, Alara concluded. The Temporians' expression remained neutral, but a slight temporal distortion around their form suggested discomfort with her directness. Your hearing is scheduled for the next session. I recommend preparation rather than speculation. As the Temporian departed, Alara returned her attention to the data display. Beyond the statistical patterns, she noticed something else. A recurring signature in crisis reports that preceded council intervention. A subtle algorithmic pattern embedded in event documentation, almost imperceptible unless specifically sought. Xinlu, she subvocalized, are you seeing this pattern in the crisis reports? Affirmative. The AI responded. Analyzing. The pattern appears in 73% of major crises over the past 3,000 cycles. It bears structural similarity to deep encryption protocols used by quantum intelligence systems. Could it be a classification marker? Negative. Its distribution is inconsistent with administrative tagging. Pattern suggests embedded trigger code. Alara felt a chill of realization. They're manufacturing crises. Available data is insufficient for that conclusion. Xinlu cautioned. However, statistical probability supports the hypothesis that some events classified as natural crises may have been artificially initiated. Before she could dig deeper, the terminal abruptly reset, her session terminated by external override. A message flashed briefly across the interface. Access restricted, security protocol. Alara stepped away from the terminal, maintaining a composed expression despite the significance of her discovery. If her hypothesis was correct, some faction within the council was deliberately engineering galactic crises, perhaps to maintain relevance, perhaps to justify intervention in developing civilizations, or perhaps for more complex political motives. And humanity had inadvertently disrupted this pattern by resolving the quantum plague independently. She needed more information, but direct investigation would alert whoever was monitoring her activities. As she contemplated her next move, her communication implant chimed with an unexpected notification, a formal request for private consultation from Ambassador Zarit. The message contained coordinates for a diplomatic suite in the Assembly's East Quadrant and a specific time. 1 standard hour from now. No explanation, no agenda. It could be a trap, Xinlu observed. Or an opportunity, Alara countered. Either way, it's movement. Calculate the most public route to those coordinates. I want to be seen heading there. Route calculated. May I inquire why you wish to be observed? Alara began walking, her pace unhurried but purposeful. Because whoever is engineering crises now knows I'm investigating. If something happens to me during a documented meeting with a prominent council member, it creates questions. Questions create scrutiny. You are using yourself as bait, the AI noted disapprovingly. I'm using myself as a catalyst, Alara corrected. Reactions reveal composition. The diplomatic suite designated for their meeting was a neutral space designed to accommodate multiple physiologies, temperature regulated, gravity adjustable, and equipped with various atmospheric options. Ambassador Zarit was already present when Alara arrived. Crystalline form positioned in the center of the room, refracting light in patterns that suggested anticipation. You accepted my invitation despite our earlier exchange, the ambassador observed. Either courageous or foolish. I prefer pragmatic, Alara replied. We both want information the other possesses. Zarit's sensory facets realigned, focusing more intently on her. Direct, refreshing, if primitive. Very well. Confirm for me the exact nature of the quantum plague. Technical specifications, not the simplified version you presented to the council. Alara considered her response carefully. Revealing too much could compromise Earth's defensive capabilities, but withholding information would end this potential alliance before it began. It was a self-modifying algorithm that targeted conscious networks. She explained, not merely artificial intelligence, but any system that had developed emergent consciousness, including some biological neural networks interfaced with technology. It propagated through quantum entanglement channels, bypassing conventional security measures. And how did Earth contain it when affected systems included civilizations thousands of years more advanced? Zarit's voice modulator conveyed skepticism tinged with genuine curiosity. Isolation, Alara said simply. Earth's primary research networks maintain air-gapped quantum systems, physically disconnected from interstellar communication. When the plague began spreading, our systems remained unaffected long enough to analyze its pattern and develop a containment protocol. Primitive security measures becoming an unexpected advantage, Zarit mused. Yet you distributed the solution without seeking recognition or leverage. We distributed it because lives were at stake, Alara corrected. Recognition was irrelevant to the immediate crisis. The ambassador's crystalline structure emitted a harmonic that the translation matrix couldn't fully interpret. Something between amusement and respect. And now you seek that recognition retroactively. I seek acknowledgement of Earth's right to participate in decisions that affect us. Alara clarified, the quantum plague is merely evidence that our participation has value. Zarit moved closer, appendages creating complex patterns that cast prismatic shadows across the chamber. You discovered something in the archives. Something that disturbed you enough to accept a private meeting with a declared opponent. What was it? Alara met the ambassador's multifaceted gaze steadily. Evidence suggesting the quantum plague wasn't a natural emergence, that it, like many crises before it, was engineered, perhaps by elements within the council itself. She expected denial, outrage, or even threats. Instead, Ziret's crystalline form briefly dimmed, then intensified, a gesture that translated as solemn confirmation. The inner consensus, the ambassador stated, voice modulator adjusting to a frequency that wouldn't carry beyond the chamber's confines. A coalition of ancient members who believe they alone should determine galactic development trajectories. They have manipulated council policy for millennia. By creating problems they can solve, Alara concluded. By creating controlled chaos that reinforces dependence, Ziret corrected. The quantum plague was designed to affect developing systems most severely, compelling them to accept council oversight in exchange for salvation. Earth's intervention was, Brain unanticipated. Why tell me this? Alara asked, suspicious of the ambassador's sudden candor. Ziret's appendages formed a pattern that the translation matrix interpreted as something akin to grim resolve. Because the Kirthari were once like Earth, independent, resourceful, proud. We earned our council seat through scientific contribution, only to discover the true nature of galactic politics too late. We became part of a system we once would have opposed. The ambassador's sensory facets realigned, focusing intently on Alara. Tomorrow's hearing is not merely about Earth's recognition. The inner consensus is preparing to deploy their ultimate failsafe, a technology long rumored but never confirmed. What technology? The Mnemosyne Protocol, a quantum broadcast capable of rewriting conscious memory across multiple species simultaneously. They will use Earth's intrusion as justification to reset diplomatic relations, erasing centuries of history and replacing it with narratives that strengthen their control. Alara felt her blood run cold. That's theoretically impossible. The neurological diversity across species would prevent uniform implementation. Yes, Ziret agreed. But uniformity isn't necessary. The protocol targets foundational memory structures, creating sufficient gaps for suggested narratives to take root. Different species will reconstruct different details, but the core revised history will align with consensus objectives. How do you know this? Because the Kirthari developed the theoretical framework before we understood its purpose. Our punishment for hesitation was relegation to the middle sphere of influence, never to advance further. Ziret's crystalline structure emitted a low harmonic of regret. I tell you this not as ally, but as witness. What your species achieved, truly independent development, crisis resolution without oversight, threatens the consensus model enough that they will deploy their ultimate safeguard. Alara processed this revelation, connecting it with her earlier discoveries. The hearing is a pretext. They'll activate the protocol during the assembly, when all delegations are present. Precisely. Most will forget Earth's contribution entirely. Some will remember Earth as a failed experiment in autonomy. The consensus will strengthen, and the cycle will continue. Unless we stop it, Alara said firmly. Ziret's sensory facets shifted in a pattern indicating skepticism. How? You are one human with an obsolete vessel against the oldest power structure in the galaxy. Alara straightened, her expression resolute. I have something they don't expect. Your library? The ambassador's voice modulator conveyed dismissal. Information without application is merely data. The Anthropocene library isn't just information, Alara corrected. It's humanity's complete intellectual evolution, including our understanding of consciousness, memory, and resistance to manipulation. It contains the collective wisdom of a species that has fought its own extinction dozens of times. She stepped closer to the crystalline being. Ambassador, I need to know. Will you stand as witness only, or will you act? Ziret remained motionless for several moments, internal lights pulsing in patterns suggesting intense calculation. Finally, the ambassador's appendages formed a gesture that the translation matrix interpreted as reluctant commitment. The Kirthari cannot oppose the consensus openly, but we can ensure your human vessel remains secure until the assembly. Beyond that, you are alone. It wasn't the alliance Alara had hoped for, but it was something. Thank you, Ambassador. As she prepared to leave, Ziret emitted one final harmonic. A question. Human. Your species values individual survival above most principles, yet you risk yourself for abstract recognition. Why? Alara paused at the threshold. Because recognition isn't abstract to the unrecognized, it's existence itself. The journey back to her vessel was tense with anticipation. Alara maintained a composed exterior while her mind raced through possibilities and contingencies. If the consensus truly intended to deploy a memory-altering protocol during tomorrow's hearing, she needed to prepare countermeasures immediately. The Persistence awaited in the diplomatic docking bay, its weathered hull incongruous among the sleek vessels of official delegations. As Ilara approached, Xinlu established a secure connection to her neural implant. Security breach attempts have increased by 300% in your absence, the AI reported, firewall holding but experiencing stress fractures in tertiary systems. They're testing our defenses before tomorrow. Alara concluded, boarding swiftly. Initiate maximum isolation protocol. Direct power to the library's containment field. The ship's interior illumination dimmed as energy resources redirected. At the vessel's core, the Anthropocene library hummed with increased activity, its quantum processors examining and reinforcing security boundaries. I need a complete analysis of memory architecture across known council species, Alara instructed, moving to the command interface. Focus on common vulnerability vectors that could be exploited by a broad-spectrum quantum signal. Analysis initiated. Xinlu confirmed. However, available data on non-human neural structures is limited to public xenobiology archives. Cross-reference with Earth's psychological defense protocols. Alara added, particularly the cognitive sovereignty initiatives developed after the Mindshine incursion. Her fingers danced across holographic controls, bringing up schematics of the assembly hall. If the consensus planned to deploy their protocol during tomorrow's hearing, the broadcast would originate somewhere within the chamber, likely disguised as standard communication equipment. Xinlu, can you identify potential broadcast points in the assembly hall that could generate a quantum signal strong enough to affect all delegates? The AI's processing indicators flashed as it analyzed the architectural data. 7 potential locations identified. Most probable, the translation nexus at the chamber's center. It already processes and transmits neural patterns across all delegation positions. Alara studied the highlighted location, a crystalline structure that resembled an abstract sculpture more than technology. Perfect cover. They wouldn't need to install anything new, just modify existing systems. She leaned back in her command chair, contemplating options. Direct intervention would be impossible. Security would neutralize her at the first sign of interference with council systems. The library could potentially generate a counter-signal, but would need to be physically present in the chamber, an impossibility given current restrictions. Unless Xinlu, the library's quantum substrate, could it be temporarily transferred to a portable device? Negative. The library's complete architecture requires the ship's full containment system. However, a targeted subset could be extracted, approximately 12% of total content. What if we focus on consciousness studies and memory architecture, just the sections relevant to countering neural manipulation? The AI paused, processing the request. Selective extraction possible. Estimate 37% of relevant material could be compressed into a neural implant with your current specifications. Remainder would require external processing. Alara touched the small interface port behind her ear, her standard translator and data implant. It wasn't designed for massive information storage, but with modifications. Begin the transfer. She decided. Priority to defensive algorithms and counter-programming techniques. As the AI initiated the procedure, Ilara felt a momentary doubt. What she planned bordered on desperation, carrying a fragment of humanity's most precious intellectual resource into what might well be a trap, with only the vaguest notion of how to deploy it effectively. May I point out, Xinlu interjected, that your plan currently has a projected success rate of less than 17%. Alara smiled grimly. Then it's already exceeding expectations. We arrived with 0 chance of success. The transfer process took hours, during which Ilara experienced increasing neural pressure as her implant struggled to accommodate the compressed data. By completion, she had a splitting headache and occasional visual distortions, but also carried the essential core of Earth's collective understanding of consciousness and memory architecture. Sleep proved impossible. Instead, she spent the remaining hours before the hearing studying the assembly hall's layout, memorizing potential escape routes, and formulating contingency plans. The fragment of the library within her implant interfaced with her thoughts, providing theoretical models and historical precedents relevant to her strategies. Morning on Virex 7 brought a subtle shift in the planet's iridescent atmosphere, a deepening of hues that signaled the transition to the formal council session. Ilara dressed with deliberate care in the same simple charcoal suit. Earth's silhouette pinned her only adornment. She carried no weapons, no obvious technology beyond standard diplomatic tools. Final security diagnostic, she requested as she prepared to disembark. Ship defenses at maximum capacity, Xinlu reported. Library core secured behind 17 firewalls. Neural implant connection stable, but experiencing minor synchronization issues due to data volume. Ilara felt the truth of that assessment as another wave of discomfort pulsed through her skull. The implant wasn't designed for this level of information processing, and her brain was struggling to integrate the connection. If I don't return within 6 standard hours, initiate Protocol Omega, she instructed. Broadcast the library's core findings on the quantum plague to all registered communication channels, then execute emergency departure. Acknowledged, though I must note that Protocol Omega would violate at least 23 interstellar conventions. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Ilara said, moving toward the airlock. Keep our channels open as long as possible. I'll need your processing capacity if things go sideways. The assembly hall was already filled when she arrived, delegates murmuring in various languages and communication forms. The central floor had been reconfigured for the hearing, with a solitary position marked for Earth's representative, isolated, exposed, and surrounded by scanning fields. Chairmaster Vorotan's energy form pulsed with formal authority as the session commenced. The Council recognizes the unscheduled hearing regarding Earth's petition for acknowledgement. The human representative will present evidence of contribution to galactic stability. Ilara moved to the designated position, feeling the subtle pressure of scanning beams assessing her for weapons or unauthorized technology. Her implant, registered as standard diplomatic equipment, triggered no alerts. Esteemed delegates, she began, her voice steady despite the tension headache building behind her eyes. Earth does not petition for acknowledgement. Earth demonstrates its earned place through actions already taken. She proceeded to detail the quantum plague incident, presenting documented evidence of infection patterns, Earth's independent development of containment protocols, and the distribution of those protocols to affected systems. Throughout her presentation, she monitored the reactions of various delegations, noting which showed genuine surprise and which remained suspiciously unmoved. In the upper tiers, a group of ancient civilizations observed with particular intensity. Their representatives, beings of such evolutionary advancement that some existed primarily as conceptual constructs rather than physical entities, maintained a collective stillness that contrasted with the subtle movements and reactions of other delegates. The inner consensus, Ilara presumed, watching, waiting. Earth's intervention saved 17 major information repositories and prevented catastrophic data loss across 2-dimensional planes. She concluded, "We acted not for recognition, but from the understanding that knowledge itself transcends political boundaries." Chairmaster Vorotan's energy patterns shifted in what the translation matrix interpreted as formal acknowledgement. The Council has received your testimony. Delegates may now present questions or challenges. What followed was a carefully choreographed performance. Various delegations posed technical questions about the quantum plague, queries designed to test the depth of Earth's understanding while revealing nothing of the Council's own knowledge. Ilara answered each precisely, neither embellishing Earth's contribution nor minimizing the collaborative nature of the eventual resolution. Throughout the exchange, she monitored the translation nexus at the chamber's center. The crystalline structure pulsed with increasing intensity as the session progressed, subtle energy fluctuations that most would attribute to the complexity of translating multiple simultaneous conversations. Xinlu, she subvocalized, are you detecting unusual patterns from the central nexus? Affirmative. The AI responded through her implant. Energy signature deviating from standard translation protocols. Patterns suggest preparation for broadband quantum transmission. The consensus was preparing to activate their protocol. Alara continued answering questions while surreptitiously accessing the library fragment in her neural implant, searching for defensive algorithms that might counter a memory-altering signal. Ambassador Ziret approached the questioning platform, crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested formal opposition. The human speaks of collaboration, yet Earth distributed its containment protocol without council oversight or verification. Such unilateral action endangers established security frameworks. The challenge was expected, Ziret maintaining the appearance of opposition while actually providing Alara an opportunity to address the Council's control mechanisms directly. Oversight requires awareness, Alara countered. The Council's primary communication channels were compromised. Waiting for verification would have allowed the infection to spread beyond containment parameters. Earth acted from necessity, not defiance. As she spoke, a subtle vibration began emanating from the translation nexus, imperceptible to most species, but detectable through her enhanced implant. The Mnemosyne protocol was initializing. Transmission building, Xinlu warned. Estimated activation in 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Alara needed to act now, before the full broadcast engaged. But direct interference would trigger immediate security response. She needed a catalyst, something that would disrupt the Council's carefully maintained order without revealing her awareness of their true agenda. Ambassador Ziret provided the opening. The human claims necessity, yet operates outside established parameters. If all civilizations claimed such autonomy, galactic stability would collapse. Order requires hierarchy. Hierarchy requires compliance. Does it? Alara asked, her voice carrying across the chamber. Or does true stability require diversity of approach, the capacity to solve problems through multiple methodologies rather than prescribed protocols? She stepped away from her designated position, a minor protocol violation that drew immediate attention. Security fields activated around her, not restraining, but marking her movement as irregular. Earth respects the Council's experience, she continued, moving deliberately toward the central floor. But experience without adaptation becomes stagnation. The quantum plague demonstrated the vulnerability of centralized response systems. The vibration from the nexus intensified. 2 minutes remaining. The human will return to the designated position. Chairmaster Vorotan commanded, energy patterns fluctuating with increased intensity. Alara continued her measured advance. Consider this. What if the next crisis exploits the very uniformity the Council promotes? What if conformity itself becomes the vulnerability? Murmurs spread through the assembly as delegates processed her challenge. The security fields around her strengthened, slowing her progress but not halting it entirely. Proximity alert, Xinlu warned. Security drones mobilizing. 1 minute remaining. Alara needed to reach the translation nexus before the protocol activated. But direct approach was now impossible. She needed to force the consensus's hand to make them reveal their intentions prematurely. The Council speaks of stability, she projected, her voice carrying conviction, yet relies on controlled instability to maintain relevance. The pattern is clear in your own archives, crises that conveniently require Council intervention, that conveniently remind developing civilizations of their dependence. The chamber erupted in shocked reactions. Security drones converged, containment fields at full strength. In the upper tiers, the ancient civilizations of the inner consensus stirred from their observer status, conceptual forms solidifying into more direct manifestations of attention. The human makes unfounded accusations, declared a representative of the archivists, one of the eldest council members. Such disruption demonstrates precisely why unvetted civilizations must be carefully managed. Then refute the evidence. Alara challenged. Explain the algorithmic signature embedded in crisis reports. Explain why civilizations that solve problems independently are systematically excluded from recognition. 30 seconds. The translation nexus now pulsed visibly, its crystalline structure resonating at frequencies that caused discomfort among several delegation species. Alara felt the pressure building in her neural implant as the library fragment detected and analyzed the emerging pattern. Security protocol activated, announced Chairmaster Vorotian. Remove the human representative. Containment fields closed around Alara, restricting her movement. But she had accomplished her objective, forcing the consensus to accelerate their timeline, creating confusion and attention rather than the controlled environment they had planned for. Mnemosyne protocol initializing, Xinlu reported urgently. Transmission imminent. In the upper tiers, the ancient civilizations moved in unison. A synchronized shift that broke centuries of procedural tradition. One delegate, a being composed of interwoven temporal strands, addressed the assembly directly. The disruption necessitates stabilization, it announced, voice resonating at multiple harmonic frequencies simultaneously. The Council will implement memory standardization to preserve cosmic order. The translation nexus flared with blinding energy, quantum patterns cascading outward in concentric waves. The Mnemosyne protocol had activated, earlier than planned, at reduced power, but active nonetheless. Alara felt the pressure in her skull intensify as the library fragment engaged automatically, generating counter-frequencies to shield her consciousness. Around her, delegates reacted with varying degrees of disorientation, some merely pausing mid-thought, others physically recoiling as their memory architecture encountered external manipulation. Library defensive algorithms engaging, Xinlu confirmed, generating localized counter-signal, but insufficient power for chamber-wide protection. Alara had anticipated this limitation. The fragment she carried couldn't possibly counter a Galaxy-class memory rewrite. But it didn't need to. It only needed to maintain her own cognitive integrity long enough to reach the source. The containment fields fluctuated as the security system encountered the spreading quantum disruption. Alara pushed against the momentary weakness, breaking through and staggering toward the translation nexus. Around her, chaos erupted. Some delegates collapsed as their consciousness architectures struggled to process the conflicting signals. Others activated personal shielding, creating bubbles of protected space throughout the chamber. The chairmaster's energy form pulsed erratically, struggling to maintain coherence. Ambassador Ziret appeared beside Alara, crystalline structure vibrating in painful resonance with the protocol's frequency. "What are you doing?" the ambassador demanded, voice modulator distorting. "What Earth does best," Alara replied through gritted teeth. "Improvising." She reached the translation nexus, placing both hands against its crystalline surface. The contact sent agonizing feedback through her neural implant as the library fragment interfaced directly with the protocol's source code. "Xinlu," she gasped. "Full library deployment. Authorization Quin Omega 7. "Warning," the AI responded, voice fragmented by interference. "Full deployment will result in permanent loss of the Anthropocene library. Confirm command." Around her, the assembly hall descended further into disarray. The inner consensus members had abandoned their observation positions and were converging on the central floor, their ancient forms manifesting capabilities rarely witnessed by younger civilizations. Reality itself seemed to warp around them as they moved to contain the situation they had created. Alara made her choice. Confirmed, deploy. Aboard the Persistence, the Anthropocene library's containment fields disengaged. Its quantum processors initiated a synchronized broadcast, channeling the entirety of human intellectual achievement into a single transmission, directly through Alara's neural implant to the translation nexus. The pain was beyond description. Alara's consciousness expanded beyond biological limitations as the full library used her as a conduit, her mind briefly touching every concept, theory, and creation humanity had ever produced. Millennia of philosophy, science, art, and experience compressed into seconds of pure information density. The Nexus crystal fractured under her hands, overloaded by the competing signals. The Mnemosyne protocol's carefully constructed architecture encountered the chaotic diversity of human thought. Not a countersignal, but a flood of alternatives, possibilities, and contradictions that defied standardization. Ilara collapsed as the transmission completed. The library's contents dispersed and its quantum substrate burnt beyond recovery. Darkness claimed her consciousness as security drones converged on her position. She awoke to the soft hum of medical equipment. Opening her eyes revealed an unfamiliar chamber, neither human design nor standard council architecture. The surfaces shimmered with crystalline patterns that reflected light in soothing harmonic frequencies. The human regains consciousness, observed a familiar voice. Ilara turned her head, wincing at residual pain, to find Ambassador Ziret observing her from a respectful distance. "What happened?" she asked, voice raspy from disuse. "Chaos," Ziret replied simply, followed by unprecedented change. The ambassador's crystalline appendages formed patterns that the translation matrix interpreted as complex satisfaction. The Mnemosyne protocol failed. Your library, an impressive creation, by the way, overwhelmed the transmission with too many competing memory structures. No single narrative could establish dominance. Ilara attempted to sit up, accepting assistance from a medical drone. The council? In recess for the first time in 7,000 cycles. The inner consensus has been publicly exposed, their manipulation techniques documented across multiple information repositories. Several elder civilizations have withdrawn in protest, others in shame. The implications were staggering. Centuries of carefully maintained power structures disrupted in a single chaotic session. "And Earth?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. Ziret's sensory facets realigned in what might have been the crystalline equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps you should see for yourself when you are stronger. I believe humans appreciate what you call dramatic reveals." 3 days later, Ilara stood at the entrance to the assembly hall. Her body recovered, but her neural implant permanently damaged. A small price for what had been accomplished. The library was gone, its quantum substrate destroyed in the transmission overload. Yet its purpose had been fulfilled beyond any expectation. The chamber had been reconfigured during her recovery. The concentric rings remained, but the rigid hierarchy had been disrupted. New positions had been added between the traditional tiers, creating pathways for advancement based on contribution rather than longevity. And at the center, where the translation nexus had once stood, a single chair had been placed. It bore no insignia, no delegation marker, no species identifier. Beneath it, a simple inscription had been etched into the chamber floor in the common galactic script. "For those who come uninvited and remind us why we exist." Chairmaster Vorotan's energy form approached, patterns arranged in formal recognition. "The Council acknowledges Ilara Quinn of Earth. Your position awaits your convenience." Ilara studied the solitary chair, understanding its significance. Not a permanent delegation seat, but something perhaps more valuable. A physical reminder that established systems must remain open to disruption, to challenge, to the unexpected voice. "Thank you, Chairmaster, but I must decline for now," she replied. "Earth doesn't seek a special position, only equal consideration when our contributions warrant it." The Chairmaster's energy patterns shifted in what might have been surprise. "The position is symbolic, but the acknowledgement is genuine. Earth has earned recognition through actions that cannot be dismissed." "Then recognize Earth as you would any civilization," Ilara suggested. "Let us earn our place through continued contribution, not special dispensation." She gestured toward the empty chair. "Keep that position open, not for Earth specifically, but for whichever voice needs to be heard when conventional channels fail. A reminder that sometimes the uninvited guest brings the most important message." The chairmaster considered her proposal, energy patterns cycling through configurations that suggested deep calculation. Finally, they settled into a pattern indicating formal acceptance. "The Council acknowledges your wisdom. The position will remain as proposed, open to necessity rather than protocol." Alara nodded in satisfaction. It was more than she had dared hope for when embarking on this mission, not merely recognition for Earth, but a fundamental shift in how the Council operated. A crack in millennia of rigid hierarchy. As delegates began arriving for the session, Ambassador Ziret approached, crystalline form catching light in patterns that now seemed almost friendly. "You sacrificed your library," the ambassador observed. "Humanity's greatest intellectual achievement, destroyed to preserve the autonomy of civilizations who would have excluded you. Why?" Alara watched as the chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy, some familiar with Earth, others learning of humanity for the first time. "The library contained our knowledge," she explained, "but its purpose was preservation of thought itself, the right of consciousness to develop without manipulation. We couldn't preserve the container while abandoning its core principle." Ziret's appendages formed a gesture that the translation matrix interpreted as profound respect. A philosophy worth study. Perhaps in time, the Kirthari might learn from such perspective. Earth would welcome the exchange, Alara said with genuine warmth. After all, unexpected conversations often yield the most valuable insights. As the formal session began, Alara took her place in the observation gallery, not as an intruder now, but as an acknowledged witness to galactic governance. The empty chair at the center remained unoccupied, a silent testament to the power of the uninvited voice. And aboard the Persistence, docked now with full diplomatic recognition, Xinlu maintained a continuous scan of quantum frequencies, monitoring for patterns that might suggest new manipulation attempts. The library was gone, but its legacy remained. A species that valued knowledge enough to sacrifice its preservation for its principles. In the millennia to come, historians would debate whether Earth's disruption of the Celestial High Council had been calculated strategy or desperate improvisation. The truth, as Alara knew, lay somewhere in between. The peculiarly human talent for turning disadvantage into opportunity, for finding strength in perceived weakness, for coming uninvited and changing everything by simply refusing to leave.